doesn't matter if it's in the poor part of town or the rich part of town, they're equitably bad to my stomach. Okay. So I think part of the education is trying to create the vision of the framers, and that take away some of the fear that there's going to be some inconsistencies. If it's an inconsistency between the schools where they're offering different things and it's leading, and that's because they're trying to reach excellence, that's okay. If it's just an inconsistency due to economics, then that's inequity. And so I think part of what we have to make sure we do is convey that vision that this is, that we're trying to build a culture of innovation and not the fast food school district. Okay, so we may end up losing some of that consistency in search of excellence. And so that was just one of my takeaways around the fear that parts of the department has, is that they value consistency higher than innovation. Did I say the department again? I'm sorry. A blanket apology. The district. So.
Just to add on to that, member, I'm not going to add on to your fast food analogy. I can't top that. So you all aren't going to learn about my personal eating habits here today. But one of the things that I think I've been frustrated by in this whole sort of process is it seems like there's sort of two separate conversations happening and we're conflating the two things. So I think there are lots of opinions out there about AB 469 and whether as written, is that a good thing for our community or not, right? That's sort of been decided at this point, but I think that is sort of like one way to look at this. I think there's another piece that's like very technical, like how do we comply with the law, right? And I think what I see happening is various groups and factions are, the pathway they are deciding to take is sort of a blending of those two things, right? I may have a philosophical difference about 469, whether that's good. So I'm going to do compliance in a way that aligns to my philosophical belief. And you see that sort of on every sort of side of the argument. And so I do think the thing I just want to name is that like, this is about what is the current law and how do we comply with the current law. And I think if there are real philosophical differences the district or others have about like, we don't think this is right for kids or the conditions didn't play out the way we thought they should, like, let's have that debate and that conversation. And we certainly should have that conversation. There are models out there that are decentralized that show strong results, or models that are centralized that show strong results, right? There's different ways to get to the end goal. And each of those need a certain set of conditions in place. I don't know if we really looked at those conditions and whether they were in place when we made a decision, but this was sort of the compromise, solution of let's not break the district up. But I just want to make sure that we don't have folks conflating those two separate pathways. One is about like, is this the best thing for our kids in our community? The other is about, given what's there, how do we comply with this and what do we need to do to go from point A to point B? And so I think where some of the mistrust is coming from is folks thinking that you were not complying because there's some other ulterior motivation. That may or may not be true. I don't know. So anyways, I just think we should like be careful in all of this to separate those two, I guess is the point, and make sure that right now we're focused on compliance. And we should also take up the other issues if there are larger, broader issues at play around this law as written. But that's sort of not really what the purview is for this. And I think we're getting those mixed up.
Thank you, Member Hughes and Member Newburn, for your comments. And that is a good summary. We are here to assist with the compliance of AB 469, and that can be very supportive. If we can come up with a plan together, that would be great. And how can we support that work? And again, if there are issues, then those would be concerns or things that can be brought to the legislature and looked at again for a fifth time. Forget how many times exactly. But the point is that this can be a collaborative process and there's no one way to do it. But the point is, as a subcommittee and then as a state board, we are here to help find ways to help with compliance of the law. So it can look a lot of different ways. So I think that's important to remember. Are there any more open topic discussions that we would like to bring up on this agenda item before we move on to the next presentation? Okay. So the subcommittee now will review results from the AB 469 Stakeholder Survey and the Principal SOT Survey. Ms. Datuki, please proceed when you are ready. Hey, Ms. Datuki, for the record, give me just a second. We're bringing it up. Thank you.
Yeah, take it from.
And while she's pulling that up, I want to just mention to the board and the audience, we are going to try to stick to our 5 o'clock meeting schedule. And if we go over a couple minutes, that's okay. But the goal is to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you, Tina Statuki, with the Office of Ed Life for NDE and support for Assembly Bill Subcommittee AB 469. I am here today to present a summary of the responses received from the 2 surveys we sent out in October. One is the AB 469 Principal and SOT Survey, and one is the Stakeholder Survey. The first survey we sent out was the Principal and SOT Survey. This survey was sent out to all principals, and the principals were asked to please meet with their SOTs prior to completing the survey, and I will share the results. From the principals that sent it in, there were a total of 89 elementary school principals who sent it in, a total of 20 middle school principals who sent it in, 26 high school principals who sent it in. The principals were asked a specific set of questions. Questions specifically asked whether or not their school precinct had formally entered into these agreements each year. You could see the number of yes respondents on the left and the number of no respondents in the middle, and those people who did not answer the survey. There were also a total of 3 respondents who answered that they didn't represent either the middle school, high school, or elementary school. The second question was, have you met with your school associate superintendent annually to review each SLA? Again, you can see the respondents. The predominant number there, 115 of those who responded said no, they did not meet with their school associate superintendent annually. The next question was, in the past or recently, have you expressed a desire to modify any of the SLAs or to terminate the services for future school years? Again, 43 said yes, and 95 said no. We then asked if they did ask to terminate any of the services provided by the SLAs, which services were those that they were interested in terminating. This was an open-ended question, so they could have answered, put anything down. A majority of those who actually added information were 31 said that they specifically asked about landscaping and grounds. 6 answered correctional schools, 6 answered about English language learner testing. 4 had just answered various, meaning they had a number of things they asked for. 3 about FACES or Family and Community Engagement Services. 3 about academic centers. 2 about the Substance Abuse Awareness Program.
two about summer academies, and all the rest had at least one person responded or wrote those services they wanted to terminate. And then we asked finally what was the outcome of the request. 15 responded that they got no response. 12 said that their requests were denied. 10 said nothing happened. 2 said their requests were pending. 1 said it was resolved, and 1 said that they were told that their request was too expensive. The final question for the principal and SOT survey was whether or not the request was brought to the board as was stipulated in the SLAs. 1 said that their request was brought to the board, but it was denied. 1 said that they brought the request to a board member, but it was never discussed at a board meeting. The second survey that was sent out was a stakeholder survey. This was sent out to the specific groups who represented the different employee groups. And the groups were then asked to provide responses on input from the people that represented. Of the groups that responded, we had response from CCEA, we had a response from the NSEA, we had a response from the CEAB and from CCASPE. This survey was a little bit more in depth, asking them to agree or disagree to certain questions and then to provide further input. I'm not going to read them all to you because some of the responses are very in depth. The first question asked, after reading the information at the top of section 1, which basically was just the regulation as it was written, the information and resources provided to local school precincts to implement the service learning agreements or SLAs was sufficient. And you can see that CCA said they agreed with it, strongly agreed that the information was sufficient. The other 3 organizations said they disagreed. The second question about service learning agreements said what additional information or resources needed to be provided to local school precincts to implement the SLAs. That is not included in the guide, which is the guide that they post on CCSD's website. And you can see the examples. If you want me to read them to you, I'd be happy to.
No, that's okay. But yes, we can read them. Thank you.
I'll give you a minute to read it. And you can see the responses are broken down in columns by which organization answered which way. Shall I continue?
Please, and in subsequent slides, if you just want to do a quick summary of what each paragraph or response says, that would be helpful for anybody listening online, please.
Absolutely. The second question was the current SLA provides a process enables local school precincts to carry out the responsibilities of the plans of operation as intended. CCEA said they strongly agreed. NECA said they disagreed. CEAB strongly disagreed, and CCASAPE strongly disagreed. The next question asks what parts of the SL process are working well, what is not working, and what needs to change. CCA basically said that the SLAs do provide choice for in terms of service that they want or the ability to provide an alternative or to seek an alternative. NSCA did not respond. CEAB said none of it works, and CCASAP said there are parts that work, but there was confusion as to whether or not there's an actual transfer of authority or not. The next section was specifically on staffing. We asked how should in good standing be defined. CCEA said it was having proper licensure and effective evaluation and a serious discipline. NACA said it was a rating of developing or higher. CEAB or SOT said licensed teachers who are not a threat to the safety of students. And CCASAPE says they should be eligible to be hired with a clear license, not have ineffective ineffective or developing evaluation and not have any active discipline. We asked whether principals are making every effort to ensure that effective licensed teachers are employed at the local school precinct. CCA said they agreed. NSEA said they didn't know. CAB said they strongly agree, and the CCASAPE said they strongly agreed. CEAB said the employee's ability to accomplish their responsibilities, and CCASAP said that they should have no ratings of ineffective or developing, and they should, if they have any ones or twos on their evaluation, they should be considered by potential hiring for local school precincts. As far as discipline, we asked whether or not employee discipline should affect their good standing. CCA agreed, NSEA disagreed, CEAB and CCSAPE both strongly agreed. We asked if it did, what type of discipline. CCA said any discipline that was at a serious level where an educator may be relieved of their duty. NSEA did not respond. CEAB said that they were not quite familiar with educational discipline, and CCSAPE said all active discipline should affect any kind of good standing. The next question we asked is whether principals should be provided access to personnel records, which would include previous evaluation disciplinary documents for current district employees, both licensed and unlicensed, who could be placed at their schools. CCEA and NSEA disagreed. CEAB and CCASAP strongly agreed. We asked whether or not the current staffing practices and policies affected student achievement. CCEA and NSEA said they didn't know. CEAB and CCASAPE both said that they believe that it negatively impacted student achievement. We asked whether current staffing practices and policies affect student achievement. CCEA and NSEA did not respond. CEAB said they are not centered on promoting student centered achievement, but rather on employee performance. And CCASAPE said forced placements do not involve the school precincts in the hiring process and do not take into account any criteria to ensure the person is fit for the individual school or program. We then asked whether or not, or how should, to the greatest extent possible, be defined. CCA said it should be an educator who's available for employment, who has been rated effective, has a proper license, and has no serious discipline pending. NSEA did not have a response. CEAB said that if the SOT team can justify it, it should be seriously considered. And CCASAP said that individual school precinct should make good faith to hire a staff member who's qualified and best fits the needs of the school. The second part of that question, principals should have access to the personnel records of all potential candidates, not just those who applied for their school. All of the associations disagreed. CCASAPE strongly disagreed. And then we asked whether or not school precincts should be provided equal access to all potential candidates. CCA responded that they didn't know. NSEA agreed, CEAB disagreed, and CCASAPE strongly agreed. And that was the total survey data. Anyone have any questions? Thank you, Ms. Tatuki. That was a lot of information to digest in a short amount of time. I will look at my colleagues to see if they have any initial thoughts or questions.
Member Newbern,
Member Newbern, go ahead.
I think I'm gonna have to sort of pour through it and digest it, see what we can glean out of it.
That is a reasonable response, very much. Member Hughes?
Yes, Member Hughes. Ms. Suzuki, could you, we heard some public comment and it was just one person, but just want to make sure I understand, like it sounds like it was pretty comprehensive in terms of survey response rate, but can you just share a bit more about, I'm just trying to I want to pour into the data, and also with any survey, we know there's always some weird things that happen of who responds once it's in the hands of principals, that they really consult the SOTs, who is do we know anything about sort of who the respondents are, the process, or literally just here's the survey, here's the guidelines, but there's no understanding of actually where all these people consulted with? I asked that because on some of the questions, it was sort of written, even from an organizational standpoint, sort of in the eye, almost as an individual answered it versus it was a collective response. And so I'm just trying to get a sense of the respondents.
Ms. Suzuki, for the record, thank you for that question. For the directions given to all of those groups, it was clearly stated in the directions when we sent out the survey links that we really wanted them to make sure that their answers represented the people that they represent. So the principal survey was sent out to all principals. There was a 36% response rate for that, which survey results, it's actually quite good. And then for the stakeholder surveys, they were sent out to select or specific stakeholder groups. They were asked to consult with the people or to make sure their answers represented what the people they represent.
Got it. Thank you. And then just real quick, I think it's just a typo in the presentation. And so I'm not trying to edit anybody, but just want to clarify. I know in the first few slides it said service learning agreement. Can we confirm that it went out with the proper terminology in the actual survey? It was service level agreement. I just want to I think it was just probably a typo on the presentation, but wanted to make sure that that was not in fact how it went out in terms of what people were responding to.
If you give me a minute, I could go back and pull up the survey.
I can get it. It was a service learning agreement.
Okay, that's totally fine. Yeah, and if there's other questions, I just wanted to clarify that.
So I'm thinking about the surveys. And when we had created, or I think the intent behind sending out the stakeholder survey was that the stakeholder groups kind of poll their members and then provide us with a combined response versus
Individuals.
just a one, not that it would be one-sided because they're representing an organization of people, but is the concern, Member Hughes, perhaps that we should get an actual N size for these stakeholder groups to see how the response is, direct responses from individuals?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a concern, just more of a consideration as we look at the data. I just wanted to sort of think about how robust of engagement, if we had any information. Again, we heard that some, SOTs might have been consulted, some might not have been. And so again, I know that's a level of detail we wouldn't really want to. So maybe in future surveys, we maybe should actually ask that as a question, tell us how you engaged your constituent groups. So that we can sort of pair that and know, is this representative of a few people or the entire body, knowing any group has disagreements within it. So not necessarily a concern. I just was curious to know, again, to sort of make sense of this data alongside that.
Ms. Suzuki, for the record, I just did confirm it does say service level agreements in the survey as it went out. I also wanted to confirm that when the survey was originally sent out, we did give them a deadline, and then we did get response from a few of the principals said that they had their SOT meetings later in that week. So we moved the deadline back to make sure that they were provided the opportunity to meet with their SOTs prior to completing the survey. So we moved the deadline back to enable them time to meet with their SOTs.
Thank you for adding that. I appreciate it.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, what I would add to that is the goal of the survey obviously was to get as much information as possible. It did go out as Ms. Tutuki noted, per the request of principals, because of the timing of SOTs, we did have it open longer, and at least for that portion of the survey, I think that having the 33% response was pretty good.
Wow. 33% of 350
Member
billion.
Dockweiler, for the record, and there, from what I've heard, there was great variability in how that information got sent out to. The way that it was worded was that the principal would work in collaboration with their SOT to complete the form. I've talked to some SOTs who never had that conversation. I've talked to SOT members who just received the link and were told, go ahead, you fill it out. And then the principal also filled it out, you know, so I don't know. And again, and as a board, we drafted the survey. So we did our best attempt, and we're learning. It's an iterative process, right? We would ask different questions probably next time, or ask point of what it's definitely data, but I don't know exactly if it was collected in the manner in which we had initially intended. So but it's still data. Any other thoughts, or Member Hughes, I'm looking at you for some thought processes here. Do we want to, are you okay with the level of data as it is, or would you like some more direct polling of some of the constituents or members?
No, I mean, my perspective is I think similar to Member Newburn, and that just needs some time to sort of dig into it and sit with it. Yeah, so I don't know if I have a strong opinion that like we need to collect something different. I mean, I will say it's striking at first glance of just seeing there's sort of the full spectrum, which is not surprising. But you know, same questions and very different perspectives. So yeah, I just want to dig into it a bit more, but nothing specific that I'm thinking now that I would say like it's going to be that helpful to add on to it.
Okay. Team is Tutuki, for the record, can I just add one thing? I did want to let you know the stakeholder survey, the groups were asked to identify themselves when they completed the survey. When it was a principal and SOT survey, we did provide the respondents the ability to remain anonymous because we wanted to make sure they had free to answer the questions any way that they thought best represented their SOTs in their community. Thank you for sharing that, Ms. Tutuki, and thank you for the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Ebert. Thank you. For the record, Superintendent Ebert, a portion which we didn't go into depth when Ms. Ballard and Mr. Gowdy were at the table, but was specifically in regard to collective bargaining. And I think the latter part of the slides, right, were to inform is early on with this group and AB 469. The question was, you know, how is good standing defined? So those pieces, I don't want to make any assumptions on behalf of the Clark County School District, but I would imagine there was conversation in regard to the pieces that this board or subcommittee have brought up will be incorporated into their discussions moving forward. Alrighty. Excuse me.
Where are you going? What are you doing? You looking for the trash? You looking for the trash bag?
Okay. We'll close out that item. Are there any future agenda items for future discussion? Member Newburn?
Yes, Member Newburn, I have two. Since the superintendent carries the enforcement hammer, if it would be possible, I'd like to get sort of the superintendents at a giving the superintendent some time, an analysis of the item on CCSD's agenda. Okay. And we've heard what people think, we've heard what the district thinks, and we've voiced our opinion, but I'd like to give the department, saying it right this time, a chance to sort of analyze what's happened and give us that feedback on what, because there have been some issues raised around ELL, some public comment, a chance to sort of look at what just happened and give us the department's view of that.
Yes.
And the second item,
What just happened?
I'm not sure how to ask about this, but the chair brought up receivership, and I'm starting to get a lot of emails about that. Is it possible, since the Attorney General's office is our legal representative, is it possible to get a closed client attorney meeting to go over sort of what the broad spectrum of actions could be? I'm looking for a closed meeting like we have sometimes with the Attorney General's office.
I will turn that question over to Dag Gardner, please.
So this is Deputy Attorney General David Gardner. Yes, we could. It would be considered a non-meeting for litigation purposes, as this has been a topic that has been litigated. So I believe that we could do that.
Wonderful, thank you. Because Member Newbern, you're right. There's a lot that could go into that. So having counsel on that would be very, very important. Anything else? Member Newbern, Member Hughes.
Member Hughes, just the only thing I would, again, I think at some point, probably sooner rather than later, we named, I think I wrote down 5 things that we said could be possible regulatory actions. I feel like we probably want to go deeper and dive into each of those and start to think about like what, so Member Newbern brought up like CCSD training for trustees or other boards, so like what that might look like, what the regulation might be. So it seems like we should sort of explore those broad topics we named today as a future item.
Wonderful. So we can certainly add those to the list. We can have that meeting with the Deputy Attorney General and move towards some sort of work session in the next several weeks to determine some next steps and work towards some more definitive regulation ideas. Any final comments from the board? Superintendent Ebert, any final thoughts? I appreciate the discussion, and we will prep an agenda as directed. Okay, at this time, we will take public comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction. I'll open the second period of public comment under last agenda item, comments. Thank you. At this time, may be on any matter within the subcommittee's jurisdiction. Please be sure to fill out a comment card, turn on the microphone, and begin by stating your name for the record. Please note I will limit your comments to 3 minutes. We will take public comment in Carson City first and then in Las Vegas. If you are unable to attend but would like to provide a written statement for public comment, please submit your statement to ndboarded@doe.nv.gov before the close of the subcommittee meeting. Are there any comments in Carson City?
There are not any public comments in Carson at this time.
And there are public comments in Las Vegas. So we'll start with Lindsay Daly. There he is. Okay, thank you so much.
Wow, I get to be first. That's scary. I'll just jump right in. My name is Lindsay Daly, for the record. I live in Logandale, member of 2 SWAT teams on our Community Education Advisory Board. Once of a discussion that happened today, which was, I thought, great, and I totally agreed with all the discussion here, where it was going. I was involved on the, I don't want to overplay this, but intimately involved with the AB 469 development. We were making the pitch for our schools and how to, do things. And so I got to meet with Michael Strumbinski multiple times, with 2 or 3 people, a very intimate discussion. So I understand the theory behind what's going on here. And all of these items that were discussed were thoroughly discussed and vetted in front of that legislative committee. And they voted for this provision. So it's not like this was done in a vacuum and all of a sudden they came down and said, well, CCSD, that's what you got to do. I mean, CCSD was right there, kicking and screaming the whole time. So the idea that somehow this just snuck up on them it does not have credibility. And the legislators are smart people. And they heard all these arguments from CCSD. So I just want to make that point, and I'm way too long on that particular thing. The 8515 number is a very critical number because that ensures the large district won't re-centralize. If you start dropping that number down because they say they can't do it, then you're basically playing into their hands that they're going to re-centralize. That number is there for a reason. And Michael Strumbinski was very adamant about that number. And then let me tell you a quick story about Grand Hannibal that kind of helps clarify the perspective that the district is bringing to the table. That, well, we just can't do it. It's not possible, blah, blah, blah. And, and principals don't want this and on and on. He was a retired regional superintendent from CCSD. And we had the blessing, and I'll use the word blessing, to have him as our high school principal for 4 years. And it was amazing. He came in, and at that point, empowerment schools were a big deal. And he got to use empowerment in our high school. And he was very guarded about that. Around CEP, I watched him bloom and develop, and he gets all the credit. And I don't get any of that because he realized what it's like to have autonomy. And this is his quote. I can just see his grin when he said it. He says, I didn't know what that was really about. And after I did it, I was going, what part of freedom don't you like? And he had that conversation with the staff, with the teachers, because it took them 2 or 3 years, to figure out what it was like to actually have control. Yet people have to learn that. And so you can't sit there look through a central lens and say, oh, well, there's nobody wants it. People have to be taught and learn. And I watched that with Grant Hannibal, and he was a great advocate for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today. Next we have Sylvia Lazos, Nevada Immigrant Coalition.
Thank you again for the opportunity to comment. And I want to repeat again the groups that fall under the Nevada Immigrant Coalition, just to give you an idea of the broad reach of our coalition. The NIC is comprised of Plan Nevada, Culinary Union, Make the Road, New Lawyers Association, Planned Parenthood, SEIU, OnDocuNetwork, Children's Advocacy Alliance, ACLU, Catholic Charities of Southern Nevada, ACDC, One APIA, and For Nevada's Future. And as a group, we are highly alarmed of what's happening between CCSD and the services that ELL children are receiving. This is the way that I see the law. You receive federal funds for IDEA and Title III, and with that comes an obligation on the part of the Nevada Department of Education to ensure services to those children are actually delivered, right? So that obligation supersedes AB 469. It's not subsidiary to 469, but it is on top of 469. So you need to make sure that 469 is able to be structured in a way so that those children get the services that they need to have an equal education opportunity. That's the guarantee from the federal government with respect to those federal funds. That's a condition you get them, is so that you follow these rules and guidelines from the federal government. Now, how do we do that? Number one, with respect, Superintendent Bieber, some of this, what CCSD said about testing, and we talked to, and I think you heard it, and I heard it last Thursday, that they talked to 5 principals about their capacity to do ELL testing without support from central office. With respect, this is not sufficient data upon which to make that kind of decision. You also heard if we were really doing ELL testing right, we would have 60 testers in central office. And instead they eliminate all 9 or whatever the number is. And there's an addition 15 vacancies that have not been filled because of their administrative decisions. What am I trying to get to? I'm trying to say you need to investigate this a little bit further. This promise that, yeah, we're going to do the ELL testing right needs to be looked at with data. Are you doing it within 30 days? What resources are principals having to rededicate so that this happens? Does that mean that staff that they should be doing art, tutoring is now going to be pulled away so that you can do the testing? These things come at a cost. Look at the WIDA data school by school. Are there outliers? Is there one school that has a bunch of 1s and then a school that has a bunch of 5s? That's telling you that the quality and consistency isn't there. So with respect, ELL services need to be investigated as to what's going on with the SD. And my final suggestion to you is this: why not carve out ELL and special ed from this 8515? We made that argument at the very beginning of this process. I don't know, Member Newbern, if you remember that discussion, but our argument has always been that when you include special ed and ELL services in this 8515 allotment that has to happen, what you're doing is jeopardizing the ability of Central to guide the delivery of services in a uniform way to these vulnerable classes.
Thank you for speaking
all
with
right.
us today.
That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Anna Binder?
I'm recording. Okay? I'm recording. I'm still on.
Okay, good evening. I'm so glad we're not focusing on SPED tonight because we'd be here a while. Some things that are really alarming. I'm sure the rest of that takes some digestion. But one of the biggest things that I called out last week when they put up Agenda 5.01 was the spreadsheet that CCSD produced for material really only outlined that they had received maybe about 20 responses. So it took getting all the way to the meeting and the discussion for them to actually disclose that they said they got about 220 responses back. But the way that they did their outline, it only looked like a few responded. And then so that's what prompted a lot of us to start reaching out to SOTs and some principals, because I know we didn't get it. And then obviously we've talked to a lot, like others didn't get it. Like we're trying to figure that out. But anytime, like, so just even on the response that you guys got tonight, like in totality, like we have what, 365 schools, and you only heard back from like maybe 117. And also anything in the beginning of October is very difficult for SOTs because they're going through elections around that time. So most SOTs in Clark County run their elections right at the for the meeting in October. So that's how I know that quite a few of the SOTs overlooked the CCSD survey because they're juggling, you know, elections and all these things. And then we found some other failures. Something else alarming about the ELL, in the one middle school that I volunteer at, I've identified 12 students in that school that are ELL, but they're shoved into general ed and they're failing. And the teachers can't provide for them because they're in oversized classrooms with predominantly English speakers. They're all doing the best that they can do. But these students are relying upon their classmates and the grace of a Spanish speaking teacher, which this campus only has 2, to try to help them not fail. And so if that's only in one middle school, what's going on in the rest of the schools? And then if you want to talk about character, you can look at what CCSD tried to do to Global Community High School over the summer. They tried to take the amazing culture and everything that they do for immigrants in the ELL community, and they tried to rip it away from 9th and 10th graders. And then what did we have to do, guys? What did we have to do? We had to go and get the community to stand there and make them give it back. If that tells you anything about like the intent of whoever is making those calls about ELL, because why would you ever cut a program like that and then make the community come back and fight you for it? I mean, that's like a no-brainer. Why would you take that? Why would you try? And now today, I mean, it's there, but now we're all on guard. Like, what's going to happen? Like, you know, can't drop that ball. Can't drop that ball.
Thank you, Ms. Binder. Mr. Paul from Line Mac Middle School.
Ken Paul, principal at W. McLean Middle School. I just wanted to talk about preceding that board agenda item of last Thursday. Two days before that came out, I did receive a phone call from Ballard, and she said she was talking to 4 rural principals about this, the rurals and landscape maintenance. And when she talked to me about it, I did ask a couple follow-up questions on the phone. One was, would the amount of money be what was listed in the SLA? Kind of hinting, is it per pupil funding, or are you saying it's the amount there? Because we're not sure that actually represents what it really costs for it. And the other one, I'm trying to remember, we had 2 questions there, and my brain's going. So I did get a little uncomfortable because I hadn't had time to talk to the SODs, and would there be enough money in that? Oh, and would we still have a choice if we felt like the process or the procedures weren't there? Was this agenda item just going to say, hey, sink or swim? And so I wrote an email back and saying, hey, I don't want Lyon Middle School to really be part of this because there's just too many questions. She did come out to my school and visited with me and 2 other principals from Valleys that day. When she walked out, I felt like that day that, okay, maybe we can support this because they're just trying to help the rural schools kind of model this. I kind of took exception with the idea that they were going to do a full funding, but I felt like the full funding should have happened. It was supposed to be there already. So then the very next day, the agenda item came out, and it had so many other things on there. You know, to where there was the utilities and trash, and there was the ELL, and there was the pretty much that 4th item, trying to pretty much centralize all of those back. And I do remember a couple times before we met in person and after, basically saying that it was a courtesy, making sure I understood that it was a courtesy that she was telling us about that, or the rules about that agenda item. And again, the thing that's hard for me with that is this board agenda item to me was huge, and it affected so many people in so many precincts. And yet it was just a courtesy that we were just supposed to be watching for the board agenda item and figure it out for ourselves. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that sometimes I feel like there's site-based administrators and central administrators, and I felt like the whole law was supposed to balance that, maybe even tweak it a little bit towards the site-based administrators, but it doesn't feel that way.
But your charter.
Thank you.
That's why.
Thank you, and perfect timing. Ed Gonzalez. You're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Before I get started, I do want to highlight that President Linda Cavazos is here. She's my trustee. I do appreciate her being here and actually staying for the entire meeting. She's been very forthright in trying to understand this issue, so I just want to put that on the record. I just want to highlight two things. I think when we talk about the money and the transparency, I do appreciate Member Newburn because he brings the historical knowledge into this. I don't want to get into the legislative fights that we've had for the last 5 or 6 attempts at bills and probably last 4 sessions. But I think when we get to transparency, I think we're probably doing 85% backwards. It seems like the district is trying to shove 85% into schools and try to get that number. I think we probably should look at it in reverse. Let's start the dollar at the school and then take the 15% out. If we're really having the conversation, does 85-15 work? We'll probably get a better idea that way if we do it from that transparent. Session with SB 469. It was the same conversation. You take the list of services, make it restricted, and take it out of the 85-15, including utilities and transportation. The legislature at that time disagreed with it and actually gutted that bill for that one. But in my conversation, when I was going back and forth with Brad Keating and I were arguing with Edgar Flores, who was then the chair of the Education Committee after Tyrone Thompson sadly passed away. I just want to highlight one paragraph that I wrote in there, and I'm more than happy to submit this to the board later. It says, my argument has always been that money will be removed from schools, and by expanding the services as restricted, it gives the school board an incentive to re-centralize services that have already been passed down to schools, such as custodians and other services. If that happens, they're exempt from the 85-15 ratio. That is what CCA wants to do with transportation utilities. Instead of saying that no money will be removed from school budgets, a qualifier has been added that there is no decrease in discretionary funds. And so I feel like we're relitigating the same issues as before. And even in that session, Senator Modenis wanted to push it up to 90% while removing some dollars. So I don't think when I hear the district saying that the funding formula overrides AB 469, I don't think even the authors of the bill thought that. And so I do appreciate what you've done with these hearings. I know I've watched a couple of them online. It's a very different tone that this board has done. And it's been a very civil conversation where it should have been from the beginning. And this board has always done that. So I appreciate what you've done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm trying to stop this before it goes off on all of us. Thank you for those comments, and my sincere apologies to President Cavazos. I should have recognized your presence earlier in the meeting. So thank you for, I'm remiss, so thank you for attending to this evening. We do appreciate you being here. It's the mask. A couple different things about the funding. I think that is, I appreciate when solutions are offered during public comment, because I think that we've identified a lot of problems. So the solutions are much welcome. And perhaps we can add that to our list of considerations in terms of how the funding gets distributed. I think that we talked a lot. So there's a lot of conversations. I appreciate everybody who's contributed and everybody here for attending. There still seems to be some trust, some fear, some transparency issues. So anything that we can do to support transparency, and we certainly support all of those efforts and whatever that looks like, and hope that CCSD also is willing to work towards all of that with us. So let's see where we're at. Have there been any public comments submitted online?
No.
No more have been submitted. We've gotten through them all.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your time today. We hope that you and your families are staying safe and healthy, and we look forward to our next meeting. I adjourn the subcommittee meeting at 5:22.
Well, that was interesting.